Check me out. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Mile High Mentors podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Very, very excited. Our team over here, we're very excited to have you listening in to the show. My name is Connor Doobie. I am your host. Each and every single episode, every week, I bring you insights, information, resources from the local entrepreneurs, mentors, leaders, influencers, just bringing you guys value so that you can go and create success in your life. Okay? Wherever you're tuning in, be sure to leave us a review. Don't forget to subscribe and give us a shout on social media. We absolutely love to hear from you guys. By the way, our partners over at Denver Open Media are putting on an event, which is Saturday, March 24th at 7 p.m. It is called the Frozen Flamingo Fundraiser. It'll be at the Mercury Cafe in Denver. All proceeds go to Denver Open Media. Again, Frozen Flamingo Fundraiser, that'll be on March 24th. Definitely recommend checking that out. Denver Open Media is an incredible resource for people who are interested in creating media content. They provide training, information, everything that you need. And so you can also check them out. What's their website? DenverOpenMedia.org? Yep. DenverOpenMedia.org. Go check them out there. By the way, do you sell products or services business to business? Be sure to check out our other partners over at ActiveBlogs.com. You're probably aware LinkedIn is a really good place to be marketing and branding your company. If you feel like you're not getting the full benefits of what LinkedIn has to offer, check out the webinar they're putting on. You can go register at ActiveBlogs.com/webinar. For that, our guest today, very, very excited. Mr. Steve Paul. Really enjoyed having him on. He just left the studio. Steve has had a really successful career, started out with doing speaking and sales training and has had really influential people in his life that has helped him grow professionally, spiritually as a human being. He's had a successful construction business here in Denver for over 25 years, which, by the way, guys, that industry, that's very, very impressive to be there for over 25 years. So very excited to share his information with you. I hope it brings you lots of value. I know I'm going to listen to this podcast quite a few times over afterwards. Without further ado, please welcome Steve Paul to the Mile High Mentors podcast. Appreciate you coming down, Steve Paul.
Hey.
Thanks so much, man. We're gonna roll right into it. And very glad to have you here. Super excited. I want to go back to that, but let's start. Where are you from originally?
Oh, originally?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's start with my father.
Give us an origin story.
Okay. All right. I'm originally from the Dakotas, North Dakota, and then...
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Great place to be from. They have great hockey up there, by the way. Great pheasant hunting and great walleye fishing, so that's all
Are you
good.
Still a hunter?
You know what? That's something I never picked up.
Really?
But,
no.
Do
you still fish?
Love to fish. It's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah. Last time I went, dude, I would love to go hunting again sometime soon. Just bagging your own meat, and now especially with all the processing. But first time I went hunting, I went with my dad way back, and we camped in an army tent in like 4 feet of snow. We went elk hunting. Didn't bag.
Crazy. Crazy.
Yeah.
Well, it can be a lot of fun when you do well.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah, we didn't.
And a lot of my friends pheasant hunted up there. But I grew up in South Dakota making, that was my first taste of construction. And it was kind of crazy there because it gets really cold in the wintertime. And I came here in 1984 just because we were out of work one winter. And I came out here just to work for a while, make some money, and go back home. And that's where I met my beautiful wife.
Was here? Or
Yeah,
back
was
home?
here.
Yeah. So you grew up there, and then at what point did you move to Colorado?
So 1984, I came out here myself. I was about 24.
Mm-hmm.
Myself and a couple other guys. Literally just came out here because we heard there was a lot of work.
Was this post-college?
So I'm one of those cases where I didn't go to college. I was born. Both my parents were school teachers. In fact, they both had master's degrees in education, and I was their big experiment. I was the oldest kid to two teachers, and so by the time I graduated from high school, I had been in every kind of special class or everything they could think of. And so I basically broke their hearts by not going to college. I just didn't know what I wanted to do.
Both your parents were educators.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did they ever become entrepreneurs at any point? They're educators.
They were school teachers. My dad eventually became a principal, and I think as far as the entrepreneurial trail, I believe it or not, I started hanging out in pool halls and kind of like that. And the guy that owned one of the places that I played at, and he was a pretty good pool player, him and his partner were kind of entrepreneurs. So that's kind of where I picked up that entrepreneurial spirit right there, was from those guys. All right.
Pool hustling.
Well, I'm not going to go down that road. Those are some colorful stories right there, but I will...
good podcast content has to have colorful stories.
Okay. I can tell you this. At one point in time, I knew that if I walked into any place, there was about a 99% chance, maybe 99.5% chance I could beat anybody in there. And at least if there was someone in there that was good enough to beat me, I'd figure it out pretty quick, right? But what really happened out of that whole thing, those few short years, was it instilled a confidence in me that that I can't replace. So I can't look back on that with regrets at all. I think I think that I've always been learning. I mean, just like you, I look at you, Connor, and I look at where you're at this age, and I'm saying, man, you have a bright future. When you start figuring things out this young, you can do amazing things.
Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Man, I actually feel like I'm very behind on a lot of stuff, so I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And I was always a book reader, and so what I started doing, someone introduced me to a couple of really good books, Dale Carnegie books, Zig Ziglar, and that kind of thing, and that really got me fired up. The sales aspect and all that sort of thing. So
in your pool hall, like, was this... What time was this? Was this when you were 24?
No.
When you moved out here, or this was still back home?
This was still back home.
Gotcha. And you were engaging with these people, and somebody had kind of an entrepreneurial fire, and it got you interested and kicked off down that direction a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. The owner of the place that I hung out at was actually kind of a mentor of mine. Mm-hmm. And even though it was a pool hall, kind of a bar kind of place, and we were playing pool and doing all that, he was actually a really good guy. And he recognized a couple of things in me. And they also had a construction business going, and then they had a cabinet refinishing business going. And so I started getting involved in that. But those guys kind of inspired me that I could do more with my life. And that's why I think that encouragement and mentoring and that sort of thing is so important. I know that you've had people in your life that have believed in you, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And maybe that little extra push that they gave to you kind of really got you going and kind of got you a little bit excited. Is that right?
Yeah.
So I believe so much in that concept all along the way that we can still learn from other people, and we can turn around and pass that forward to other people that need that might have that hunger, that desire, and they just don't know, what's the next step to take. And a lot of times that's it, is that little push
Right.
from behind.
Just that one golden nugget, right? That one piece of information.
The one piece of information,
Yeah.
I would say equally as powerful would be that that someone believes in you and pushes you out there. I could, for example, how many times do you see it? You go into a store, a UPS store, for example, right? And the trainee is trying to figure something out, and then someone runs over there and just jumps in and does it for him, right? That's not helping.
I think a lot of failed leadership situations are like that too. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely, I would.
Instead of allowing somebody to kind of fail on their own and guide them along the way.
As long as they're not an airline pilot, right? I mean,
Yeah.
You have to do your failing on the simulator, right?
Right.
But absolutely, I can think of a couple of different examples, where that encouragement really makes a huge difference. I remember I was a framing contractor in the early 80s, and one of the larger contractors that I was working with, I was kind of our crew was kind of the roof framing specialist. That's what we were doing. And he wanted me to go run a big church job for him. And I was telling him, I've never done this before. I mean, how am I going to be able to get through this? I mean, and he said, Steve, it's really easy. Just follow the blueprints. You can do this. You got the knowledge. You got the skill. Well, so our crew and I, we went there on this job, and the superintendent of a big, large commercial construction company figured out in short order that I was in a little bit over my head, all right? And he knew that his job depended on me getting my job done correctly. And so for quite a while, every morning, 7:30, I was going in for my butt chewing by this guy, right? But then he turned around and he'd spend time with me at the blueprints, showing me this, showing me that. And I literally got a master's degree in how to work with post and beam and shear walls and large glulam trusses at that time through his tutelage. And I really owe a lot to that guy. I mean, he took me under his wing. He was probably 55 at the time, and I was like 25. So I can, it'd be great to hear an example of someone that mentored you or gave you a little push.
Yeah. I mean, me personally, I think my parents, first of all, have just inflated my brain from a very young age. My mom always pushing me. She's kind of an entrepreneurial person. My dad's had his business for years, and so that was kind of the foreground. And then, there's been a lot over the years for me personally. Even at RBA, I came along with great people. Julius has been a mentor to me at some point, training me how to sell and how to pitch right at the door and having that outside person. But, a lot of I feel like I'm still kind of looking for that person that I one-on-one completely align with, who's doing the things that I have set for my goals. So that's probably still there, but I indirectly receive mentorship from probably a lot of other people through content and consuming their, either podcast or vlogs or written content. So again, part of the reason why I wanted to do this show was in order to get that one golden nugget into the ears of someone else that could completely change their lives.
So what is your golden nugget?
Man, just big, audacious, ridiculous goals. My objective, first off, I want this podcast to be the biggest out of any other in Colorado, most listened to, more downloads than any other podcast in Colorado. And I want to help a lot of people, and I want to be financially successful, because if I'm financially successful, I know that I can help more people. I can help more people if I'm making $155 million in my bank account than if I have $155 in my bank account. I know I can help more people that way.
Well, that's a really magnanimous goal, and that's really awesome.
Yeah.
And I think when you start to when you look at me and you see all the gray hair, and people talk about experience, there's certain things that unfortunately you figured out, the hard way. But one of the most amazing things to me that I've realized in mentorship or in leadership, for example, is simply people watch what you do. I mean, and I'm a parent. I've got 3 grown kids, but I mean, your kids watch every move you make.
Right.
And literally, when you own a company and you've got employees, it's the same thing. So right there, just in how you conduct yourself and the decisions you make and the integrity and that sort of thing, right there is mentorship already.
How do you think people should find their mentor or know that they've found the right mentor?
That's really an interesting question, because I've had times where it just kind of fell in line with
what's going on in the times.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. Yeah. No, you said something interesting. Go ahead.
Well, because I think you can make a judgment about somebody. I mean, if that person, I live and die by, what Zig Ziglar said, and he said,
which I think you should share that story.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. I just love it. First of all, my favorite saying of his is that, if you'll just help enough other people get what they want, then you'll surely get what you need, right? And but no, I had the chance to meet him one time, and again, this was inspired by one of my mentors already. We were members of the National Speakers Association, and my partner in the business at the time, the year before, he had gone to the National Speakers Association, and he had seen that there was at the networking breakfast, Tony Robbins, there was an open spot at Tony Robbins' table. So we sat down, introduced himself, and so on and so forth, and he told me about the story. Well, the next year, we're in Washington, D.C. for it.
And you met Tony at that time?
I didn't at that one. I feel like I know him, though, because I've listened to his tapes.
Right.
And back when they were cassettes, right?
Right.
And
have you listened to his podcasts recently?
Yes, here and there, yeah.
Yeah.
But the next year, I was at Washington, D.C. for the National Speakers Association National Convention, went into the networking breakfast. I was just going to grab a cup of coffee.
Also, be careful bumping the table, because
sure.
we picked that up on audio. But
but what happened was I saw Zig Ziglar and the redhead, his wife, sitting at a table, and there was one spot open at the table, like 9 people there. And I walked right up, and I said, "May I sit here? May I join you?" And Zig spoke right up. "Sure, have a seat, welcome," and introduced himself. He made me feel like the most important person at that table, first class all the way. And I've never forgotten that. How you make people feel can have such an impact on you.
Right. I 100% feel that you emanate that very well, and obviously has probably contributed to your success. Somehow I feel that one encounter also, because you brought it up, like just making other people feel that they are the most important, because in your heart of hearts, they really are.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. I think when I think back on some of the mistakes I've made, and believe me, I've made plenty of mistakes as a leader and a business owner and whatever, they always tend to come from ego. Mm-hmm. And where we tend to have our successes is when we are thinking of the other person first, and where we are, investing in other people and engaging them, and so on and so forth. That's become really, really clear.
How do you think people can wipe out that ego? Because I think that probably is a lot of peers of mine, even I'm sure even in your demographic, like a lot of peers, they are it is very ego driven, right? How do you kind of lose that?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I do struggle with it. They call it, one person I know calls it ego comparative. Yeah. He talks about the 4 levels of happiness, and level 2 is ego comparative, and so you have to, think of a higher calling, for example, and it's not easy. And I'll be the first to admit that I get on my knees and pray every morning before I get up, and before I get moving with my day, and I ask for humility, and because there's a lot of very smart people out there, a lot smarter than me. So,
got it. Yeah. So, do you yourself? I know a lot of people are habits, like do you have any habits that you think have really contributed to your own success, even like daily? Super interesting, because I'm really trying to like get into my own habits. I know a lot of successful people have their meditation habits. You said first thing you do in the morning is get up and pray. What are some of your kind of daily habits?
Okay, well, I do that. I read scripture, and I read a lot of books. I've always got 3 or 4 books going at any given time.
You got some down here with you. What's up with these guys?
Yeah, well, it was kind of interesting. Speaking of daily habits, I brought this because on my bookshelf, I mean, we had moved a couple years back, and I was unpacking things, and I found this old book by Og Mandino, the greatest salesman in the world. And if you open it up, you can see where I was checking off the scrolls on a daily basis. Back at that time.
Yeah.
And literally, when you follow this book through the lessons that he's teaching you, every day you would spend some time on each chapter, and for 30 days, 3 times a day, you would reflect on that chapter. So reading great books by people that have done things before you is just amazing. And I was blessed to be able to meet him in person one day, and I thought I was in front of a prophet. He had that aura about him.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that was really cool, and that's why I brought a couple of these, just because some of the wisdom it just keeps repeating itself. It doesn't go away. Right? I mean,
do you have a favorite book now, one that you would recommend to anybody that's listening?
Okay, a favorite book. I read so many of them. One that had an impact on me, and this is an old one, but it's The Inner Game of Tennis, and it's really amazing because how does that have to do with sales and success and that sort of thing? But it was the ability to concentrate and perform at a high level, and avoid the second part of your mind that's talking to you in the background. So that
interesting.
That was,
what's it called again?
It's called The Inner Game of Tennis.
The Inner Game of Tennis.
Yeah, it's an old one.
Is it a self-development book, or is it about tennis?
It's about Well, I mean, the guy was a tennis player, but it's about sports performance, so to speak. But you see, the thing is you're overcoming some of your self-talk, which is still applicable, in any kind of situation. If it's a sales situation, or you're meeting someone that you might be intimidated by, ahead of time, that kind of thing. But in terms of what would be my favorite book to recommend right now, I'm at a little bit of a loss for words, because I don't know that I have a single favorite. But I'm in the middle of reading 0 to 1, which is already 3 or 4 years old, by Peter Thiel.
Interesting.
Love that book.
I have one that you would really, really like. It's called Not Taught by Jim Keenan. He's actually going to be coming on the podcast here soon. He lives in Denver, but I read 40 books last year, and his was still like, it just so happened the dude lives here, but I'd recommend that one. We can talk about it more afterwards. But,
sure, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Well, interesting thing. I mean, you were asking about how do you find a mentor.
Yeah.
I encourage people all the time to, if there's an area that they're interested in, to reach out to a person. And if you're sincere about it, and with your approach, because you really mean what you're talking about, oftentimes people are really, you'd be amazed at how willing they are to help.
I want to transition people's mindset, because I know that this was my mindset before I made that shift, is you see that person who's ahead of you, and you kind of like get distaste a little bit. It happens. It's just like this weird human quality, right? And so seeing that person who's a step ahead of you, instead of like looking at them and talking bad about them or whatever, realizing that you should be reaching out to them and you should be like consuming their knowledge, because eventually you can surpass that person, and then you got to look at the next person who's going to where you want to go. So people like see mentorship as like this linear thing, like you find a mentor and that's your Jedi Knight mentor for life or whatever. But I believe that now there's so much access to information. Find those people that are just incremental steps above you, and then you can just find your way climbing up. But people kind of like shy away from that, right? Were you ever like that as a young guy, or were you always really kind of reaching out to other people that were doing successful things over you?
Well,
that was kind of a weird way to phrase that.
Well, I think I know what you're talking about. Okay, okay. Well, the first thing I thought of when you were talking about it is if somebody was in a corporate setting and you're looking for mentors within the corporation.
Like people look at the top sales guy,
sure,
be like, "Oh, that guy's a dick because he's a top and he's like doing better than me," right?
And what I would say is that, well, first of all, if someone's higher up than you, or if they are, a great salesperson or whatever, they should be thinking about replacing themselves if they plan on moving up. I mean,
right.
So, that's kind of a little bit on them. And at the same time, I could see where it could be a little bit intimidating to them if people are trying to reach up, because there are people that want to replace you whether you want to be replaced or not, right? So a lot of times you can go somewhere else, for what you're looking for. It doesn't have to be within, the company you're at. So, that would
not even directly like in your own company, but maybe at another company who's achieving bigger things than you. Getting yourself around people that are achieving bigger things than you.
Yeah, okay. So one of the things is that people can do is they could volunteer in a trade association, for example. So, and in volunteering for the trade association, when you can find other mentors there that might have the skills you're looking for. And you're looking for a couple of situations. Number one, you want to find someone that you think is a good person. I mean, you got to start there.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter how successful they are. If you get near them and you think they are, that other person, then to me, you just walk away. You don't even reach out to them. So that's number one. And number two is you can, if you also have an area that you really want to get good at or improve at, when you're doing the volunteering, you could possibly volunteer where that person that is the possible mentor is the committee chair or whatever, or maybe there's a skill set that you'd like to hone in on or sharpen up that has to do with that, right? So that's another avenue for that.
There's probably a million different avenues for it. It's just taking that step to actually reaching up rather than shying away from looking up. You know what I mean? I guess I'm having a hard time verbalizing it, but that's just like what I really want to share with people is stop getting turned off or turned away from people that are doing bigger things than you. You should try and draw towards them and then pull those resources and learn.
Absolutely. I think the most people, and this is the way I always felt, and this is what I received from Zig Ziglar,
right,
and other people also in that organization, is that you appreciate someone that wants to learn. And, if that person that you're reaching out to does not appreciate your sincerity and the fact that you respect that person and so on and so forth, and you'd really like to learn from them. If they don't have time for it, or they don't, if it's the wrong fit, then it's the wrong fit. But there are plenty of other people that do want to help, and they appreciate that so much.
Did you rely a lot on mentors when you're starting your business? This is your first business, right? The one that you're still, because you were contracting before and then you founded.
Right, I was contracting before in the 80s, and then I went to work for a large commercial framing company for about 4 years, and then for a while I got into the speaking and training business with my partner, but at the same time I had this business going.
While you're doing the speaking and training?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
so those are like two kind of opposite end of the spectrum a little bit.
Well, okay, so actually, true story. There was ego at play here, and I started thinking, okay, I'm too good for construction.
Yeah.
Right? I can do better, right? And
when you first started your business?
No, not when I first started. I mean,
Uh-huh.
I ended up being good at it. I could make money at it, and
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. But along the way, I'm like, well, I would get frustrated when I saw, like people I had to work with. Like, right, I'm working for this commercial framing company, and I've got to work with all the people that he gave me to work with, and you got someone whistling at women walking by, or just some of the crazy characters that you end up working with. And I always would stress professionalism. Even though they weren't my employees at the time, I stressed that. I said, look, you got a superintendent here. We want to do a great job for this superintendent so that they want us back on the next job. If he's got any say on the next job, who's coming in, we want it to be us. And there's a lot of factors here. Job site clean all day, keeping the job site clean, the safety, not whistling at the women that walked by. And, everybody expects a construction worker to walk into your house, a plumber, for example, and swear like a sailor and whatever else. So I always worked hard to set those standards. And sometimes it could be frustrating. And so what I literally did was I started, I met this guy in a Toastmasters group. And there again is that whole self-improvement aspect, because I had to go sit in meetings with architects and engineers and, project meetings and those sorts of things. And I didn't want to come across as a redneck carpenter, right? I'm carpenter guy here. And so anyway, that's where I really started getting a taste for some of this as well. And I thought, this looks like
Toastmasters.
Yes.
Kicked it off for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Are you a member of Toastmasters here?
No, I haven't been in a long time. One time I was president of the Silver State Toastmasters down in Aurora. That was a number of years ago.
Yeah.
But basically, I thought, this looks like this looks like a route I want to go. And then at a certain point, I realized with all the things I was learning, I'd learned a lot about sales. I'd learned about service from some of the best in the country, in the Speakers Association.
Yeah. Were you here in Colorado?
I was here in
Okay.
Colorado, but I actually started a couple of mastermind groups with the staff. Because I did business development, and I would line up all the speaking engagements and the training engagements, with companies like Kohler and Formica and Builder Square, Home Depot, and so on and so forth. But basically, I started my own mastermind group where I got to know staff members of some of the most successful speakers around the country. And I learned from them. For example, George Walther, his staff member, she was part of it. The Slutsky brothers out of Columbus, Ohio, they did the Street Fighter marketing back then, and their sales guy. And right here in Colorado, we had the guerrilla selling guys, Orville Ray Wilson and some of those people. So
Are you still connected up with these people?
I haven't talked to a lot of those folks in a long time.
Do any of those ring any bell for you? Ring a bell for you?
Not right now.
No?
Well, what you got to remember is this has been a few years.
Yeah.
But there's still people like in Colorado, like Scott Halford, Scott Friedman.
That sounds really familiar. Scott Friedman sounds very familiar.
Mark Sanborn, Brian Tracy, or not Brian Tracy.
No, Brian Tracy.
You know Brian Tracy?
I know Brian Tracy.
Oh, man. I wrote
Not personally, but...
Yeah. Okay, listen. Here's my first impression story, okay? I'm at the National Speakers Association annual convention one year, and it's about 10 o'clock at night, and I'm just walking through. I'd been doing some networking. When you go to those conferences, they just go all night and all day, just about. But anyway, when I would go to these, I would never drink. I just always wanted to put my best self forward, at all times. And so, but I had this bad habit of chewing on ice. And I had gotten just a few minutes before a Coke from the bar. I just wanted a Coke, but it's in a bar glass and it's got ice. And I'm drinking this Coke, walking down the hallway, chewing on ice. And there's Brian Tracy walking this way. And I walked up to him, Mr. Tracy, and I was all excited to meet him and everything. Only my mouth was numb from the ice. It was kind of mumble, like that. And he He says to me, "You just keep on drinking." So that's his first
You might as
impression.
well have just been drinking anyways, I guess.
Yeah, so
that's hilarious.
Yeah, so that was his first impression of me.
So it wasn't quite as...
It wasn't as good as the Zig Ziglar story.
Yeah.
And who
what
knows?
What is Brian Tracy's major, like, thing? It's not sales, it's more finance, right?
Winning, achievement, and things like that.
Okay.
But it's been a long time. But I'll tell you what ended up happening was I quickly realized...
See, I was thinking you were going to say you spit ice cubes in Brian Tracy's face, 'cause that would have been even better.
That wouldn't have been real funny. So he and maybe it's possible that ever since then he's used that story on first impressions or something in some of his seminars. Who knows? If you're ever at an event, don't do this.
Don't drink too much.
Right? But I really felt like an idiot, right? And so I worked on being more careful with that. Have you...
Careful with the ice, June, man.
Yeah.
I can take you downhill real quick.
I'm telling you.
It's a real downward trajectory.
I'm telling you. So, something I wanted to let you know, though, that was really important during this time is that I realized, I learned from so many different people during that time that I took things I learned and applied it to construction. All right? So I've always kind of had this attitude and this philosophy of raise people up. Here we are in a construction industry, and people have low expectations, all right? And so how can we raise that level of service service to the customer, and with any construction project we do, keep them in the loop, communicate with them, and at the same time, with our people that we have, raise them up. Teach them skills, show them hope and incremental ways they can learn, and give them a kind of a career path, because it's been a great career in so many ways. So we've worked on that.
25 years is nothing to shake a stick at by any means. It's incredible.
What is? I'm just curious. You asked me about my favorite book. You told me about a book. Is that your favorite, or it's just one you think I'd be interested in?
Oh, I have so many favorite books. I'm always consuming new books. Probably one that really kicked off my major trajectory was actually. Do you know Grant Cardone?
I think I've seen some of his content on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
sure. You
might like the 10X rule. Is one of my other probably favorites. One that really, when I left actually a company Julius and I were working on together, when I left there, I read that book, and when I was going in, my dad and I read that book together, and it's been kind of a foundational pillar of our how we operate, really. So it's kind of like the activity level that you think it's going to take to get somewhere, you got to multiply that by 10. So if you think it's going to take, 10 phone calls to get that deal that you're working on, it's going to take 100 phone calls in reality. Or to get the revenue that you're looking for, you got to 10x everything. So that's kind of how I live my actions in my life, is how do I 10x everything? How do I look at something and someone says the goal should be this? No. We're looking at this wrong.
Sure. Okay. I like that. That. Well, it's Connor. It's so real in so many ways. There are ways to look at things differently in some of the most simple ways.
Right.
Joe Charbonneau was a speaker that I learned from a long time ago, but he always talked about okay, during the week, 5 days a week, that's when you can make your status quo. And if you really want to dedicate extra time to getting ahead and creating wealth, well, okay, you can work Saturday if you want to, but don't use that money for your status quo. Mm-hmm. Use that money to get ahead.
As a tool.
Yeah, a tool for building wealth.
Right, absolutely.
So that at a certain point, then you can...
you okay there, buddy? You're making me nervous.
I actually got to cut real quick.
Oh, yeah. What's going on?
I need to drop this audio.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
running out of room here.
Oh, on there? Okay, gotcha. We'll just cut. Break. Water break.
I was trying to wait for a good moment.
Yeah. Well, I was feeling it. I was like, he's creeping over. We could just keep chatting though, right?
Yeah, you keep chatting, the audio still rolling.
All right, we can just roll then. We're
Sure.
fine.
Okay.
What were we now we went on trajectory. So back to your speaking and training stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What were you doing there? What was the speaking and training that you're doing? Like, was that an actual business of yours, or you're doing that more as like a BD type activity?
Yeah, I was business development.
Yeah,
And I was
for the company that you were contracting for at this point.
yeah, that was my partner was Robert Oxley, and he was a sales trainer, a great sales trainer, and so I did all the business development. And what was amazing about him, he was about 10 years older than me, and had a lot of sales experience, a lot of training experience, and that sort of thing. And he quite often. He was great. I learned so much from him. He talk about pushing you out. We would have a consultation meeting, here at our offices in the conference room. And I'm not going to name names of some of the companies I sat in on some high-level meetings with, but they'd bring in, national sales manager and their buyers and all this sort of thing. And we'd sit down and have a planning, business planning meeting. And here I am. I'm this redneck carpenter, right? And we would I'd be right there in the meeting, and the meeting would be going on, and he'd just turn and look at me, and he would say, well, what do you think about this, Steve? Right? And I'd just jump right in with my opinions on the sales training. And obviously I was introduced as his partner and so on and so forth. But that was monumental in terms of my personal growth, that I was trusted to participate in those kinds of meetings with.
Was he much older than you?
10 or 12 years.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but
Are you guys still in contact?
I haven't spoken to him in quite a while.
Wow.
I think the last I saw he was in Las Vegas, I believe. But
Still speaking?
no, he's been retired.
Yeah.
For quite a while. But it is really interesting. Because how we treat people, I'll come back around, is so important. And we all have a tendency to look at other things before we look them in the eyes here, right?
Right.
And so while during that time that I was, basically running two businesses at the same time, and these were 12-hour days every day, 14-hour days. And but I would go into the bank one day in a jacket and tie and deposit a check, and the teller's all really happy to see me and everything, smiling, "Hi, how you doing?" And then a couple of days later, I'd go in my construction clothes with a check that was probably twice as much money, right, at the time. And the teller wouldn't even look at me. Couldn't make eye contact because I just looked like a construction worker, right?
Interesting.
And but you see it all the time.
Yeah.
And
And so quick to judge.
Yeah, and so that was just another one of those little things that you experience that when you go forward, you're like, how can I and anybody else that works for me, how can we present ourselves, even when we're in our construction gear, how can we present ourselves in such a professional manner and an engaging manner that they're glad to see us, right?
Yeah.
It was just another one of those things.
Yeah, that's very interesting. At what point did you decide to set the talking business to the side and go all in on your construction business?
It was just at a kind of a point in time where I think my partner wanted to go one direction, I wanted to go another. I was thinking really big. Let's grow a big, huge business.
Yeah.
And I think he was more satisfied with, okay, let's just do this, right here. This is exactly what I want to do. If I just have a few speaking engagements and so on, I started to see, I already had, several employees working for me, and I was seeing what the paychecks were like coming in. And because we're out here delivering great service, we went in there and attacked our industry after what I saw as the three biggest weaknesses, and I just went in there and said, you know what, if we can go in there and be reliable, just show up when we say we're going to.
Right.
If we can be professionals in everything we do, and if we can tackle the communication, close the communication gaps, I could see that this business has huge potential. So, and then it allowed me to just focus on one thing.
Yeah, again, I mean, the industry that you're in is not an easy industry. Companies come and go overnight.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So for you to be doing what you're doing for it's 25 years now, right?
25 years this month.
That's awesome.
We need to throw a party.
Yeah.
Probably-
Hey, let's do it. I'm down for a party. No chewing on ice cubes, though.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. We're good.
But I understand it. It makes sense to me, and I knew it when you and I talked on the phone. When we first talked on the phone, it's not because you're it's not because of the construction guy. It's because you're the person guy and the person development guy. I'm sure that your team is probably stellar as a result of your leadership style and your ability to carry down your perception of how do you treat people, how do you treat customers, how do you operate on the job site. Probably has more to do with it than anything.
I want to say a big yes to that and take all this credit. And I think that the people we have right now, there's been a really good influence. Where we struggled on that concept, because I had great people working with us. And
How many people do you have now?
right now it's just a handful of us, but we had at one point in time we had 25 employees, and we were keeping 50 breadwinners busy every day.
Yeah.
And so I had managers and so on and so forth. And you know what? During that time, as we were growing, I felt like I was doing a good job. We had good people. But there was a point where I really learned a few things. I would have to say that I made some, possibly some personnel decisions that weren't as good as they could have been, simply because I was a little more out of touch with them. Because I was trying to say, okay, you're the manager of this, you're the manager of this, and it's just not, as hard as you try, it just wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. You would think, and I want to excel at everything, every single thing we do, and I have tremendous respect for anybody that can get past. There's a hump, like a $5 to $10 million hump, that appears to be really difficult for businesses to get over.
Right.
And when they do, then it starts happening exponentially. For
Right.
us, when we were growing at 20% every year for quite a long time, even through the bad times, and all of a sudden 20% a year turns into, okay, now we need another 400,000 next year, now another 800,000, now another 1,600 or 1.6 million, and so on. And all of a sudden, those are big numbers really fast. And if you're not ready to scale, that's a whole nother.
Right. It could be the kiss of death.
Yeah. So
Right.
So that's my next, rework or
Yeah.
rewind.
So what is the next hump? Revenues for the company.
Well, you know
What
what?
are you guys shooting for?
So I don't want to talk in terms of revenue. What I do want to talk about in terms of is we're pared back. We want to deliver excellence. We want our team to be so good on the front end in terms of our process,
Yeah.
and that we can just deliver excellence every time. And then from there, we can turn around and start concentrating on growing back up in a better way that's a little more scalable.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what we're after. Probably.
And that resonates because we're going through that interesting challenge in our business that's been around for 18 years, and then all of a sudden scaling really quickly and have to almost like kind of shift the business model around and shift places around just to be able to fit that growth. So, it makes sense. And I hear a lot of other entrepreneurs talk about that too. It can be the kiss of death in some ways.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's the small construction companies where I've seen a guy that's had 3 guys working with him forever, and they just go along at that status quo, but they're happy there.
Yeah.
Right. And so I've got I've got some good mentors. I know I've met wonderful people in the business, in the trade groups, in construction that have, and I think I've learned enough about focus now and some of the ways to do better with our processes to have another go at it.
Yeah.
One thing I don't want to let this evening go without mentioning the best decision I ever made, which was bringing my wife into the business.
Really?
In 2001.
And what does she do?
Degree in finance. She was a CFP and that sort of thing.
So she runs the books and everything?
Right. She brought a whole level of accountability to it.
Yeah.
But
some people say shy away from working with your family. I don't believe that's the case at all. We have a family business, and it's the best. It's the best situation in the world. We're closer as a family than ever before, and I think it's really great. You and your wife are successfully working together. I know a lot of people struggle with that.
Now, how does it work in your family? How many are involved?
So right now, I do all the business development, sales, marketing. My dad, operations, running the company, and then my stepmom does all the books as well. So still interesting dynamic. We're a 20 person agency, so still a pretty small team.
20 person is still pretty good.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's fun. It's interesting because like when you have a family member, it's different than having any other boss that you work with, because you can chew each other out real quickly and kind of get real hot about an issue and then get over it and just be hugging and kissing. Not anything serious, but yeah.
So where are you guys going next?
I have really big goals for us. Initially I was like, I just look at things in terms of like building the company and revenues, because that's just a direct result of building a great company in some ways. So like initially I wanted to say, okay, let's grow to a $10 million business in the next couple of years, probably 3 years from now. And then I listened to Tony Robbins' podcast the other day, and he said something that totally just like snapped. He's like, any entrepreneur, anybody can build a $10 million company, but it really takes someone great and powerful to build a $50 million company or a $100 million company or a $1 billion company. I mean, Tony Robbins has $4 billion in his several businesses that he has, and he's one of the most giving, genuine people out there. So to go back, $50 million, that's our next milestone that I have in my mind, and I think it's very obtainable.
And you know what? I believe that. And I believe what you just said. I know some of my friends, one of my best friends runs a $150 million company. Another guy I know has an $80 million a year company. And those two guys are special. That's for sure. So I think it's really interesting what you just said, though, about you're listening to the podcast and you got that one thing. It was an hour-long podcast, and it was great. I listened to the entire thing start to finish. But that one thing stuck with me. That one thing. That is so cool, because that's going to take you, somewhere to another level.
Yeah.
Have you ever found this? Have you ever found that you've listened to one of your favorite podcasts or maybe reread one of your favorite books? I think, and maybe you've heard that podcast 6 times now, and even though it's the 6th time you've heard it, you just picked out something new that you hadn't really heard or understood the impact of it before?
100%. I've gone back and listened to our podcast before multiple times and listened to a couple of them 2 or 3 times over, and I'm like, wow, I can't even believe I missed that while like in the moment. I mean, I'm going to go back and listen to ours together and probably pick apart some stuff and just be like, wow, that was an incredible moment there. Yeah. Do you do that a lot? Like you're going back reading. You read books a lot, multiple times over. I haven't read a lot of books multiple times over. I probably should stick with a couple and read them over. But yeah.
Well, I think on the books, the biggest thing I did over the years was, I'd mark them up, I'd highlight and underline a couple of things, put big stars by
Go
it,
back and
or whatever. But being in construction, I'm driving around town all the time, so I've always got something going that's relevant at the time, and oftentimes hearing it, oftentimes as much good as you get out of listening to a podcast or someone's instructional tape or whatever, you might have gotten some good out of it already, but sometimes after 6 or 7 times, you really start to understand what they're driving at, and it helps take you, to another level. And not only taking it to another level, but you start to become more responsive to it in the moment.
Yeah.
In the moment.
Yeah, because sometimes it's really the current state of what's going on in your life that you breeze over it, and then you go back and read it, and it's more relevant now than it was at that current state. So, yeah, and those that are listening, I think going back and reviewing content, something that you got great out of that, is really important. Reviewing stuff that can make a difference in your life, make an impact. So a couple quick things, and then we got to start wrapping up here. But help anyone listening. What is your business? Who do you help mostly?
Oh, sure.
Who are kind of your clients? And do you do all residential, or you do commercial building and stuff?
So primarily, our business started as a repair and reconstruction company, and basically, we've been working with HOAs and community managers, property owners. It tends to be commercial and townhomes, condos, and that sort of thing. And so we're not doing any new builds, but it's repairs, maintenance, reconstruction, rebuilding things, tenant improvement projects, that sort of thing. And really, our mission is to make that property manager look good for having hired us to do the work. We really believe so much in the concept of building people up that we can improve their customer experience, we can help close some of the communication gaps, meet projects on time and on schedule. So that's our primary marketplace.
Yeah. No, that's great. I just wanted to kind of lay that out. And how can people get into contact with you?
Okay, so www.spcsinc.biz. That's www.spcsinc.biz. The name of the company is SPCS Construction Services, and a lot of times people ask what's the SPCS stand for, and I'll just say something. Yeah, okay, Super Professional Construction.
Okay,
Not
I was
really.
wondering about that.
No, the SP, the Steve Paul. Here.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes more sense then.
Yeah. So,
but you should just call it that. The former.
Yeah, we incorporated in 1998, and so we changed our name, and honestly, I've almost regretted it ever since, because it's kind of a tongue twister. It's 4 letters, a couple of S's. It's hard to remember. It doesn't say what we do. I mean, it's going against all the different marketing principles, but we got our logo. People know who we are.
I don't say anything.
Yeah.
From a marketing nerd perspective.
Yeah. And people think 3s are better, like SPC, 1, 2, 3, right? Yeah. ABC, right, would have been better too. So there's a lot of the former might have been better, or the latter, Steve Paul Construction Services.
Cool. But, and then anything last minute you just want to share with the audience before we wrap up here?
Well, I'm really excited by what you're doing. I'm a lifelong learner, and I really believe so much in the concept of lifting people up, and I'm excited with what you're doing, because you carry yourself so well, and people have this crazy idea. You hear all this talk nowadays about young people this and young people that, and I meet so many outstanding young people. I think it's great to see what you're doing here, and I don't know if it's okay to plug anybody else. Is that okay?
Go ahead.
All right, so I'm going to plug someone amazing.
Give him a plug.
Her name is Heather Younger.
Is she here?
She's in Denver, and she wrote the book, The 7 Intuitive Laws of Employee Loyalty, and she's done some work for us. She's awesome. If you get a chance, she's amazing.
Put it closer.
Oh, put it closer.
How's
There we go.
We can get a graphics plug.
Perfect.
So this is Heather. I know Heather. Wait, I totally spaced out. We met at the LinkedIn
Yeah.
meetup. I'm meeting with her on Friday.
Well, that's great.
Actually.
One
Yeah.
of the most amazing people you'll ever meet, and she is. And what I'm going to say about Heather is she's so genuine, and I met a lot of people in the speaking and training business. And going back to what you said about it takes someone special to hit the $50 million mark or hit the $100 million mark, I believe it takes someone special to really break through into the speaking and training business, into that area of who's really special, who can really engage the audience and have an impact. I believe she has the talent to do that, and
I think you should be back in the speaking game too.
Well, thanks, but she is so smart. She brings a lot. She's the total package.
Cool.
So,
Steve, thank you so much,
Yeah.
man. That was incredible. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to leave or subscribe. First, subscribe. Leave your reviews. Leave your comments. Leave your feedback. Thanks again. We'll chat with you next time.